We've been experimenting for a few years in understanding working with solar panels and batteries in order to move more and more of our needed equipment off grid. And in the spirit of how we generally work at Edible Acres, we wanted to figure out lower cost, lower embodied energy solutions. In this video, I wanted to share some specific notes on a very rudimentary but seemingly very functional way to make stands for solar panels that cost next to nothing and can hold up to 2 dogs slamming into them. Let me explain. We are blessed to now have 2 wonderful pups. Our friend Lenny, who you've met before if you watch the channel, and a very new friend, George, who is an exquisite young man who came up from Georgia recently. Very lovely beings, extremely rambunctious. They're having a great life, and it's an opportunity to stress test the idea of this rudimentary stand system. They slam into these things. It's not ideal. I'd love it if they didn't do that, but it's the reality. So if this system can hold up to 2 dogs wailing into it, it probably can hold up to wind and snow. Let me show you this really basic idea. I want to be real clear that what I'm not trying to do is suggest that this is the best way to make a solar panel array in any way, shape, or form. But the reality is our context is very complex. And in the fall and winter, we have more sun in our backyard. In the summer, we have more sun in our driveway. And so I need to be able to move these 4 panels. And this system makes it incredibly easy to move them. So if you have an application where you want to move solar panels, twice a year, or even more frequently than that, this may be useful to you. What I'm using here are locust staves. These are 1 inch by 2 inch staves. Maybe you'd want bigger if you wanted, but a good hardwood, a rot-resistant hardwood, seems to be able to hold up these 340 watt panels with no problems. If I go in for a closer look at the detail of how these staves are mounted onto the panels, you can see in our case, these are 3-foot tall staves. That works for the sun angle we're looking for. I took a metal drill bit that was the size, a little bit larger than this threading, and drilled through the aluminum, and then also drilled through this block of locust. It seems important to have a wooden block on the inside to receive the threading down. I put a washer, a nut. You could do a lock nut if you wanted. The length of this is arbitrarily long because that's the length it was from the reuse store when I bought it, and it works just fine. There are opportunities to make this way more elegant and precise, but I'm just using what I had. I can see here there's a gap. It's not squeezing as tight as it could, but I get under there with a wrench and tighten things down pretty thoroughly, and so far that has worked well enough. The idea with this is not, here's the perfect solution, it's here's an idea that has worked well enough for us as a starting point if you're thinking about making some movable panels in your life. Clearly, we need to give the panels a good cleaning. We just moved them out here recently. The dog prints on the bottom are interrupting how much sun gets into the system, but these are overrated for what we're needing right now anyway. Because there's an apple tree right above, there's bird poop and apples, but they're low enough on the ground that I can clean these frequently enough to keep them relatively optimized. If I had a single panel, this would work just fine. You can fold these in and move them, so it's much easier to fit through doors and passageways in a tight garden. If I wanted to unify these to make them way sturdier for the winter, I could either drill through and put a screw to cinch them together. That would go quite a long ways in unifying this panel set. I could also wrap this with hay binding twine or the like, and that would lock each set of the interior legs together, making a much more structural skin. But I haven't found that to be necessary yet. One more layer of insurance if you wanted. I have not found it to be necessary, but a hole drilled somewhere towards the bottom with a wire or a paracord locked into the frame somewhere. There's holes generally on the bottoms of these frames. That would make it so that the rear leg cannot kick outward arbitrarily, but we've yet to see that be an issue either, but those are just thoughts to consider. Out here in our 6-acre property that we are farming and developing the nursery, you can see there's some air prune boxes here. There's some high value production going on. We need to lift and move water in this landscape as well. And so here's an example of that same basic idea. This is a solar panel our friend Juan got for free. He found 8 of these for free. because they've been damaged, this still puts out 250 watts. So $0 for energy for the next 20, 30 years. We can seal that, but we're not going to worry about it. But the point I wanted to get across, same basic idea, but even simpler implementation. Here I'm using hay bale twine with a hole down low, tied back through the frame of this. There's a hole down here that it's tied through, so that keeps the leg at the right angle. And in this case, I simply took a exterior grade screw, drilled through the locust and through the metal into a wooden board behind. And this works just fine. These I went ahead and sharpened with a hatchet so that when we put them down, they stick exactly where you want them. So they're stuck in this direction, they're stuck with that, and can be lifted, folded up, and moved effortlessly. Free solar panel. The rest of this cost less than 20 cents. So 20 cents for about 20 years worth of power to lift water from a little pond to water some nursery beds. There are lots of ways in which this basic idea could be improved, to be sure, as I've mentioned. Some other things is a friend of mine, Carl, suggested that having the fulcrum, the rotational point, be a little bit higher on the stave, a little bit higher on the panel, would reduce the amount of shade being cast. That's a very reasonable thing, just to why have that extra shade there, but I could also just cut that off if need be. But if you make them a little bit closer to the actual exact height of the panel, that would reduce that additional shade. But anyway, these are panels we got as a reclaimed units for much, much cheaper than if they were brand new. The wood we got from a scrap pile yard nearby where we live. All of the hardware was from a reuse store. So this whole ability to make these sets of legs that are stable enough to have 2 dogs wailing into them, so certainly enough for wind and snow. I think it cost under $5 to make this, and it takes about 10 minutes, 15 minutes for me to move all these panels to another location and plug them back in again. So it's good enough for us, and maybe it's good enough for you too.